Welcome to today's program entitled Managing Mosquitoes Around the Home. This webinar is produced by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's Center for Integrated Pest Management. The views expressed by our presenters are for educational purposes only and do not represent the official views or positions of the EPA or the presenters' organizations. This webinar is part of a series providing information on the importance of integrated pest management, or IPM, to community health and the information needed to establish and grow effective IPM programs. This is Dr. Marcia Anderson with the EPA Center for Integrated Pest Management. This webinar will feature integrated approaches to managing mosquitoes around the home. We'll hear from Dr. Mike Merchant, Extension Entomologist at Texas A&M AgriLife Extension, who will describe the common mosquitoes that pose health risks in and around the home, as well as the integrated solutions to control them. Then, Mr. Kenneth McPherson, U.S. EPA Region 6, will discuss the personal protective measures that you should take to protect yourself and your family from mosquito bites. Your participation will empower you with the information needed to address mosquitoes around the home and the health risks that they pose. It's important to know exactly what you should be doing if, when, and where mosquitoes become a threat. Full implementation of integrated pest management reduces exposure to pests and pesticides, reduces pesticide use and pest complaints, and is cost effective. IPM is a sustainable approach to managing pests since it combines biological, cultural, physical, and chemical tools in a way that minimizes economic, health, and environmental risks. IPM provides an opportunity to create a safer and healthier environment by helping to manage pests and reducing exposure to pesticides. It's also been shown that a good IPM program can improve indoor air quality and reduce asthma triggers, thus improving health and even school attendance. An effective IPM program uses common sense strategies to reduce sources of food, water, and shelter for pests. IPM is smarter and usually less costly option for effective pest management in any community. Today, we'll be investigating a few of the key concepts of IPM in communities as it relates to mosquitoes. Conducting regular inspection and monitoring for mosquitoes in pest-conducive conditions will prevent many infestations. You can prevent and avoid mosquitoes through harborage exclusion and good maintenance practices. It's a lot easier and cheaper to monitor and manage small pest problems than it is to try to tackle large ones. IPM focuses on minimizing the impact of pests on human health and the environment. If you have good education, exclusion practices, good sanitation, and regular monitoring, you will have fewer mosquito pests. IPM is smart because it reduces the root cause of pest problems like mosquitoes. The IPM approach manages mosquitoes by combining biological, cultural, physical, and chemical tools in a way that minimizes health and environmental risks. An effective community IPM program is sensible because it provides an opportunity to create a safer and healthier environment by helping to manage mosquitoes and other pests and reducing people's exposure to pesticides. And IPM is sustainable because it provides a better long-term control of pests by reducing sources of food, water, and shelter for pests within the community. Our first presenter will be Dr. Mike Merchant. Mike is a board-certified entomologist and has served as Extension Urban Entomologist for the Texas AgriLife Extension Service in Dallas, Texas since 1989. The next speaker will be Kenneth McPherson. Ken is the Regional Coordinator for Integrated Pest Management at US EPA Region 6. He is a board certified in medical and veterinary entomology. Dr. Mike Merchant will lead off the presentation.
Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to talk about mosquito management around the home. It's a little bit different angle on mosquito control and mosquito biology, but I do want to talk about some biology and control issues. Okay, let's start off by talking about what are mosquitoes. Mosquitoes are actually flies. They are similar to a house fly or horse fly in the fact that they all have two wings. They have complete metamorphosis, which means they go through a 4-stage life cycle, including a larva and a pupal stage. The larvae are always legless in the mosquitoes and the flies. So that's one way you can tell a fly larva. This group includes the house flies, the horse and deer flies, phorid flies, fruit flies, midges, fungus gnats, and lots of others. How do we recognize mosquitoes specifically? So some of the physical characteristics of the mosquito family you can see in this mosquito I smashed on my office the other day. They have a long proboscis. You can see the round head there and the long mouth parts coming out from the base of the head. That's always going to be present in mosquitoes. They have long legs, and the wing veins on the mosquitoes have scales. And you can just kind of see this in this picture. They look a little rough around the edges, and you can see along the veins are a little fuzzy. That's the scales on the wings, just similar to butterfly scales, but just limited to along the veins, the wing. It's 172 different species of mosquitoes in the US. In my community in Dallas, there's about 38 different species. So wherever you live, you will have many different kinds of mosquitoes living. The mosquito goes through 4 distinct life stages: the egg stage, the larva, the pupa, and the adult. As you can see from the picture, the egg stage through the pupal stage are all aquatic. They live in water, and they require water to go through this life cycle. So without water, mosquitoes cannot survive. Mosquitoes may lay their eggs on water or next to water, either one at a time or in groups of eggs. Sometimes we call those rafts, and you can see a couple of pictures in this slide. The one on the upper right and the lower right are rafts of eggs laid by a Culex mosquito floating on the water. The single eggs on the left are Aedes mosquito's eggs, and these are typically laid right next to a puddle of water in hopes that the next rain that comes, the next water that visits the site, will fill up and engulf the eggs, and then that'll trigger the eggs to hatch. Generally, if the eggs are in touch with water, they're going to hatch within 48 hours of being laid. Mosquito larvae live totally in the water. It's going to take them somewhere between 9 and 14 days to go through their entire larval stage. And these mosquitoes feed on microorganisms in the water. They have little filters in the mouth that are designed to filter out bacteria and these things are very cryptic. They will drop quickly to the bottom of a container if there's a shadow or any kind of disturbance, like we just saw at that point in the video. You'll notice that each of these have a little tube-like structure at the end of their body that goes through the surface of the water. That's actually the breathing port. That's what gives them the oxygen to breathe, even in very polluted type water. So why do we care about mosquitoes? So we care about mosquitoes because they are blood feeders, that they feed on blood of a variety of different animals. Perhaps most importantly, because they serve as vectors of disease. So if a mosquito feeds on an animal that has a virus, it can pick up the virus and then transfer it to another animal that's not infected with the virus. All mosquitoes need some kind of blood in order to produce eggs. The hosts of mosquitoes vary by species, but they may be feeders on birds or mammals. They even feed on reptiles and amphibians. No matter what the host, the potential there is if you've got a virus living in a wild animal, the mosquitoes can pick that up and pass it on to another host. So which mosquitoes should we worry about? Now I'm going to use some scientific names in this presentation. Try not to be too intimidated by them. They're just names. The nice thing about a scientific name is if they share part of their name, you know that they're closely related. We're going to talk about 2 basic classes of mosquitoes, the floodwater mosquitoes and standing water mosquitoes. Each are of concern for different reasons. The floodwater mosquitoes are usually the first mosquito we encounter in the summer. Usually these are the mosquitoes that when we have the first heavy rains in the spring and the mosquitoes come out, everybody starts worrying about the mosquitoes. These are strong flyers. They can be breeding within 5 to 10 miles of where they bite you. The water does not need to stand very long for these mosquitoes because they're very adapted to taking advantage of short-lived water pools. The water only needs to be there for 3 to 4 days to breed mosquitoes. The only good thing I can say about these mosquitoes is they're not important disease vectors. These are not the carriers of the diseases that we hear about so much in the news. But that doesn't mean they can't be bad. This is a couple of pictures. The one on the left is a picture of a license plate on a truck covered with dead mosquitoes, and another picture of somebody's back covered with floodwater mosquitoes. These are mosquitoes that came out last summer in Texas after Hurricane Harvey came through. And it just is a testament to how these mosquitoes are just ready to take advantage of any big storm or rainwater event that comes through. Fortunately, they're not always this bad, but does show the potential to be a major nuisance pest. Floodwater mosquitoes are, like I say, not important disease vectors or carriers, but there are other mosquitoes that are, and most of these fall into the category of standing water species. And there's two genera or groups of mosquitoes that we generally deal with in urban environments. We have the Culex mosquitoes and the Aedes mosquitoes. These are 5 of the major species that are problems throughout a good part of the US. Let's talk about the house mosquitoes first. There's 2 species of house mosquitoes, the southern and northern house. Really, they look almost identical. The only difference is that where they live, and there are slight genetic differences, but for the most part, these 2 species act very similar. They're kind of a dull colored brown mosquito, no real striking markings on the body. They like to breed in polluted water, especially in containers or other standing water. Now, these are the Culex mosquitoes. The house mosquitoes are mostly bird feeders, but they are thought to occasionally transmit viruses to humans because they will use humans occasionally as hosts. They're, like I say, their favorite host is birds, but they will bite people if we're the only thing available. Now, there is another species of Culex called Culex tarsalis. This is a western mosquito, and it is thought to be the primary carrier of West Nile virus, Western equine encephalitis, and St. Louis encephalitis in the western part of the US. Now, these are typically associated not with standing water in a backyard, but more with agricultural fields, ground pools that are found in the country, and irrigated pastures. They prefer also birds for hosts. They do have a little bit of a banding on their legs, which distinguishes them from other Culex mosquito species, but otherwise also a kind of a dull brown mosquito. The other standing water species that are very important to us in disease control are what I'm going to call the Aedes sisters. These are 2 species that are sister species. We have Aedes albopictus, also called the Asian tiger mosquito, and Aedes aegypti, the yellow fever mosquito. Both of these are daytime biters. So these are mosquitoes you're likely to encounter even during daylight hours. Asian tiger mosquito is an exotic mosquito that's only been with us for 25 years or so. First came into the US through Texas from overseas in Asia. And the Aedes aegypti, which has been here much longer, the yellow fever mosquito, and it's been infamous for many years as being carriers of yellow fever and dengue fever and other important diseases. Both of these are container breeders. They do differ a little bit in their temperature preferences. Albopictus tends to be more of a northern species, and aegypti more of a tropical or warmer area species. But the range of both these encompasses much of the eastern, well, southern and northern states. These are fairly easy to identify because of their dark color and white banding, especially evident on the legs. When you see a little dark blackish mosquito land on you and it's got white bands on its legs, it's going to be one of these 2 species. Now, the diseases that are carried by these Aedes sisters include Zika virus, dengue fever, and chikungunya virus, all diseases that have been in the news in various parts of the country over the last couple of years. This picture shows somebody with a rash from Zika virus. In fact, this is one of our local pest management professionals in Texas who went on a vacation to the Caribbean and picked up Zika virus during a trip there. So Zika virus, probably one of the milder of all the mosquito-borne diseases, gives you a fever, rash, joint pains, red eyes, muscle pain, and headache, with fairly mild symptoms that last from a few days to a week or so. But Zika virus has been recently discovered to be able to infect developing fetus in a woman. And when it does, there's a fairly high probability that the baby will develop a birth defect, and specifically microcephaly. Health officials and certainly families are very concerned about the potential of the spread of Zika virus here in the US. With that introduction, let's talk about what I really came to talk to you about today, and that's making your home less hospitable to mosquitoes. There's probably no way we can keep mosquitoes totally out of our yards and our homes, but there are certainly things we can do to make them less welcome and less likely to be a problem in our places of living. We're going to talk about a few things. First of all, eliminating or treating breeding sites. Very first step in mosquito management around the home. We're going to talk about how you can do some treatments around the home for those mosquitoes that still make their way into our backyards and landscapes and doorways using various types of insecticide treatments. And we're going to talk about repellents. So let's talk about breeding sites first. First thing in mosquito control is knowing what to look for with breeding sites. These are just little features of our backyard that are so easy to overlook and yet can be producing dozens or hundreds even of mosquitoes in our backyards without our even knowing it. In this case, there's a couple pictures. One is a trash can lid that's probably forgotten underneath a bush and catching rainwater and leaves and organic material, a perfect breeding site for the Aedes or Culex mosquitoes. The bucket on the right, again, just a forgotten container. It was not put out there with water in it. It was put out as an empty bucket and just left there. And of course, the rainwater accumulates in there and can cause a breeding site for mosquitoes. The bucket on the lower right is a bucket of compost that was just left outside after heavy rain. The compost provides the organic material that are needed for the mosquitoes. And it doesn't take a very large container. It can be something even smaller than a Coke can that can breed hundreds of mosquitoes in your backyard. So anything that will catch and hold water is a potential breeding site for mosquitoes. From the small scale to even a large scale like this neglected pool, foreclosed home, pool sits empty in the backyard and collects water, and these can be major public health concerns in communities. Doesn't have to be a container per se. Plastics or tarps especially are notorious for whatever configuration they're left out in the yard, catching water and holding water sufficient to breed mosquitoes, sometimes in large numbers. So don't neglect those boats and other things that you just have outside covered with a tarp. Now, a lot of people think that mosquitoes breed in creeks and they come from the ponds and parks in our neighborhoods. Well, yes and no. A pond or a river or a creek that has fish in it is probably not a major source of mosquitoes. But trash and garbage, anything that becomes debris or litter in these greenbelt areas can certainly be breeding sites for mosquitoes. Trees also can hold pockets of water where they've had an old branch that's decayed and fallen away. These tree holes can also be a breeding site for especially Aedes mosquitoes. Some of the unseen places in your yard can be a source of mosquitoes that you may not realize is there. Gutters, which are so invisible to us most of the time, can catch and hold water for mosquitoes, especially if they've been clogged with leaves. So that annual or biannual cleaning of gutters to remove leaves is very important when it comes to mosquito control. And out in our streets and backyards, the stormwater catch basins that we live with that are there to catch stormwater and drain it off into the creeks. Many of these stormwater catch basins can be major mosquito breeding sites, as you can see from this picture. And don't forget, in a similar vein, the French drains that we may have in our backyard. Again, these can be sources of catching water. Even the corrugated drain pipes, hoses that are used to take runoff water, each of those little corrugations can hold small amounts of water, sometimes sufficient to breed mosquitoes in. Obviously, the best thing to do to prevent mosquito breeding is to get rid of the water sources in your backyard, but sometimes standing water can't easily be eliminated, and you may need to treat that water with an insecticide like mosquito dunks or granules. This is a picture of a mosquito donut or dunk. that's in a pond water and it's dissolving and releasing insecticide into the water. Now, the nice thing about these treatments, the mosquito dunks and the granules, they are very safe and low in toxicity to fish and animals and other things. The next thing that you want to keep in mind in terms of backyard mosquito control is keeping mosquitoes out of your house. Now, the southern and northern house mosquitoes are called that for a good reason. They will very readily come in through open windows or doors. So keeping those door and window screens in good repair is very important. Of equal importance, I would say, is treating mosquito resting sites around the house. And mosquitoes during the day oftentimes don't like to be out in bright sunlight, even the daytime biting mosquitoes. And they're hiding in shady, cooler areas around the house. Shady vegetation, also in shaded areas under eaves of houses, around doorways and porches. If you look closely, you may see a few of these mosquitoes hanging out in those places, and especially around doorways and porches where the doors are opening and closing as we go in and out. Mosquitoes are easily sucked in or drawn into those places, even if they're not left open all the time, just used for regular use. In terms of treatments that we can do, one of the things, and probably the safest and most easy to accomplish treatments, is to treat around doorways and soffits and porches where mosquitoes can get into the house. The advantage of this is that you're less likely, if you've got an insecticide that's been used to treat around doorways, the mosquitoes that rest in those spots near the door will contact those insecticides and be killed by them and not be there when you go in and out of the house. Really very few disadvantages of these kind of treatments. There's not going to be an impact on beneficial insects or anything because you're not really treating places where good insects want to be. The other option is to treat plants in your backyard, the resting sites of mosquitoes, with a residual spray. That is a spray that once you put it on the plant, it's going to stay and keep killing mosquitoes for days at a time. Advantages of this is it's not just a one-time, one-day type of treatment. It's something that can last a little longer depending on the actual active ingredient used in the product, but you can get several days to a week-long relief from mosquitoes. They're fairly affordable. They're easy to apply. In this case, with one of these products is attached to a backyard hose, and it can put out a spray on the plants that you want to treat. Disadvantages is you have to be really careful about treating flowering plants, especially because these plants can be sources of nectar for pollinators and beneficial insects. So we want to try to avoid anything that's in bloom if you're using these residual type sprays. This is a thermal fogger. This type of sprayer is a little different from anything else because it puts out extremely small particle sizes, down to half the width of a human hair in diameter. Advantages of the fogs is they give you very quick relief for biting mosquitoes for at least one day and possibly up to 2 days. Disadvantage, they do produce this heavy fog. The fog is very lightweight and will drift very readily from one site to another in wind. This can be scary to neighbors who see a fog coming over the backyard fence. And of course, it's not something you want to do is without a neighbor's permission is to apply an insecticide in their backyard. So the other thing is these can temporarily drive out beneficial insects. They typically don't last very long. It's a one-time kill and then anything can come back into the treated area, but it's very good at killing tiny things that are hanging out in foliage. The other option that many homeowners are taking advantage of these days is the use of a professional to come out and treat mosquito resting sites using a backpass mist blower type sprayer. These put out an invisible fine mist that sticks to surfaces and again provides that longer term suppression of mosquitoes, in some cases up to 3 or 4 weeks after an application. The disadvantage is again, these professionals must take care to avoid treating flowering plants because there could be some harm to beneficials. But usually it's a little less drift involved with these kinds of treatments compared to something like a thermal fogger. Now, mist blowers do have their limitations in terms of control of disease-carrying mosquitoes. They are best at treating foliage that's less than 8 to 10 feet high. Above that, you just don't get really good coverage. The Culex mosquitoes that are the carriers of West Nile virus tend to live up higher in trees because their host is primarily birds. The Aedes mosquitoes, which are more human feeders, tend to live down lower in the backyard foliage. So these mist blower sprayers are a little more effective for Aedes, which right now are not as great a disease concern as the Culex mosquitoes with their West Nile virus. The other thing that you may hear about, see on TV or in newspaper ads are mosquito misting systems. Now, these are rather controversial type treatments for some reasons. For one reason, they're fairly expensive to install. They take several days to put in. They have to be maintained. There are very few studies on the effectiveness of these treatments, although anecdotally, they probably do a fairly decent job if the timing is set correctly on the misters for controlling mosquitoes. The biggest issue probably with these types of misters is their effects on non-target organisms and the possibility when these units are used over and over again in backyards without regard to what mosquitoes are present, possibility of developing resistance in mosquito populations is a little higher. And also, of course, you have the problem the misters come on regardless of what the weather is, unless you turn them off deliberately. On a windy day, it's possible for them to trespass into other property, and you might have a neighbor who's trying to have a butterfly garden or a pollinator garden, and these would also be toxic to beneficial insects. So mosquito misting systems are probably a little less desirable from an environmental point of view than some of the more targeted sprays. I'm not going to go into depth on this. I'm going to leave this to Ken McPherson to cover, but wanted to remind you that personal protection is kind of the final piece in the puzzle when it comes to making your yard and home more resistant to mosquitoes. And repellents really do work. They are very effective, at least the good ones are very effective protection against mosquitoes. So anybody who's not using mosquito repellent in an area where mosquitoes carry disease, you're taking an unnecessary risk. And I just wanted to share a few online resources from Texas A&M University. We do have a website called Insects in the City. You can see the address there. On that site, we have some videos on conducting mosquito control around the home that actually shows you how it's done. We have fact sheets on Zika virus and other mosquito-borne viruses and mosquito problems. So this would be a resource for you if you just go to this site and type in the search window mosquitoes, and you'll find lots of information there. We also have another website called Mosquito Safari.
Next up is Mr. Ken McPherson, who will discuss the final line of defense against mosquitoes, repellents.
Thank you, Marcia. Regardless of the amount of integrated pest management that you implement around your home, you can't really control everything that's going around outside of your yard. So there will be instances where you'll have biting pressure that can be high from these mosquitoes that may fly from some distance to where you're at. Or there might be a concern of mosquito-borne disease going on in the community based off of other community activities and information that you receive from the local public health department. So in these instances, the Environmental Protection Agency and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention strongly encourage that you implement some simple personal protective measures to protect you and your family from mosquitoes. As Dr. Murch had discussed earlier, each mosquito species will have certain times and locations where they're most active. When you can, it's best to avoid being outdoors during these peak periods or visiting locations where you expect mosquitoes to be present. This is especially true during the hours of dusk and dawn at areas such as public gatherings outdoors, public parks, your neighbor's yard during a barbecue, etc. When activities require you to be outdoors, wear loose-fitting, light-colored clothing that covers your arms and your legs. This will reduce the amount of bare skin that mosquitoes can bite, and light colors are less attractive to mosquitoes than dark colors. When biting pressure is high or there's a risk of mosquito-borne disease, consider treating your clothing with EPA-registered pesticides that contain permethrin. These products provide extended protection but can have some risk. So always read the label first before use and never apply these products to skin or clothing when you wear them. Apply only EPA registered skin repellents to your exposed skin. Products that are not registered by the EPA have not been evaluated on how effective they are against mosquitoes or for the risks that they pose to your health or the environment. Many products now use EPA-approved logos that help you identify the types of pests that these products repel and for how long. We cannot stress enough the importance of following labeled directions. There are many active ingredients in skin repellents registered by the EPA for repelling mosquitoes. Read the label and select the product that is right for you. Remember, if it is not registered with the EPA, it probably does not work and the health risks to you and your family are unknown. Extra caution should be used to protect pregnant women and children from mosquitoes, as well as the selection and use of skin repellents. If you have questions about how to protect your family or have concerns on repellent use, discuss them with your family care doctor for the most up-to-date information specific to your situation. After returning from areas where mosquito-borne diseases are known or suspected to exist, continue to protect yourself from mosquito bites. There are many diseases such as Zika, dengue, chikungunya, where humans are the primary source of new introductions to your community. For more information on how to protect yourself, your family, and your home from mosquitoes, please visit the web links on your screen. Thank you.
I'd like to thank our presenters, Dr. Mike Merchant and Mr. Ken McPherson, for sharing their experiences and expertise with us. Now for your questions. For Dr. Merchant, how well do those propane mosquito traps work in controlling mosquitoes in yards?
So there are some commercial traps available that use propane to generate carbon dioxide. And the carbon dioxide is then released through the machine, usually at a point where the mosquitoes will be attracted to and can be sucked up into the device and captured and killed. There has been some limited testing of these types of devices. Problem is that each commercial product is a little different and could have different results. Also, the location, the particular weather conditions when they're being used can vary. So even though there have been shown in some cases to be some benefits to using these mosquito traps, I think it really depends on your own particular situation. So I encourage you to take the same approach with the mosquito vacuum type traps as I said with the adult traps. Is, if you want to try it, give it a shot, keep the receipt. And if you need to return the product because it's not performing the way you thought it would, then don't feel guilty about that. The overall principle of drawing mosquitoes into a trap, it's got some good scientific basis, but on the other hand, there's no guarantee that there won't be mosquitoes in your yard that aren't sucked up by the trap. The only real value to doing those traps is if you have them running 24/7 and collecting mosquitoes and hopefully reducing the overall number of mosquitoes in the backyard. So a mixed review on those products as well.
Thank you. One more question. Can I use oil or kerosene in my French drains to control mosquitoes?
So the concept there is good because oils can be used to suffocate mosquitoes that are breeding in a particular pool of water. The problem is when it rains or when you turn on the sprinkler system, whenever water is run through those French drains, you're going to wash away the oil. And so it would have to be reapplied every time. There are some devices out there that will automatically refresh the insecticide application to a French drain. They're not widely available, but there are some automated machines that do that. But in general, I probably wouldn't spend a lot of time doing that because it has to be done over and over and over again.
Another question, this one's for Ken. Should pregnant women wear treated clothing?
There's two ways to look at treated clothing. One is clothing that you purchase that has been treated at the factory. You can get a lot of sporting equipment that's already been pre-treated, golf clothing, fishing, hunting, those types of things. And then there's the product that you treat yourself and that you wear. There's a lot of stuff that looks at that says that when you utilize these products that have already been treated, that once they've been treated, they should cause no problems. But if you're treating it yourself, then there's extra precautions you need to take, and you need to follow what the label directions are. So even the clothing that you get that's been pre-treated, it's going to have some label directions in there, and you need to look at those precautionary statements to see if they pose any type of health issues that you might want to take into consideration before you select and utilize those pieces of clothing. And if you have questions about it, based off of each individual's unique situation, go to your family care doctor, express your concerns with them so that you can talk with them and get some advice before you make any type of selection and utilize that equipment.
Thank you, Ken.
We have a question from the website. Can you speak about reapplying sunscreen and repellent if both are needed to be used? So here's what the recommendation is. When you utilize a product that are two separate products, sunscreen and repellent, that you follow the directions for each one of the products separately. Best thing to do is to apply your repellent first and then apply the sunscreen. But if the sunscreen says reapply every 2 hours or after you get wet, then you just reapply the sunscreen. And then for the repellent, follow the directions on the repellent, which may have longer periods of time in between the reapplication. Never try to utilize the sunscreen application rates and directions for your skin repellent, because that may result in you over applying and reapplying the repellents to your body, and those large amounts of applications were not considered in their health risks to you. So make sure that you follow the directions separately for each product.
I have a question here for Dr. Merchant. Are there any natural or biological controls that are effective for mosquito control?
Yes, there are. Mosquitoes are subject to lots of predators and natural enemies in their natural environments, and probably fish being the top natural predator. If you have a pool or pond in your backyard, if you keep those bodies of water, even if it's just a small koi type pond, stocked with fish, and especially minnows, including the Gambusia mosquito fish, you can keep mosquitoes at bay in those areas. They should not be producing a large numbers of mosquitoes in small bodies of water. In terms of practical things that you can do beyond that, there's not a whole lot that's available right now. There always is research looking at different types of organisms that are attacking mosquitoes, but most of these are still in the research phase. And the simple answer to that is fish. Fish will certainly help in any kind of water situation.
I have one last question for Ken. What is the best percentage of DEET that I should be looking for in a mosquito repellent?
There's a lot of DEET products that are out there with a lot of different percentages, and they all work, but they all have different lengths of time that they'll stay on the skin and provide you the repellency. But the Department of Defense has done a lot of research in the use of products containing DEET, and what a lot of that research has shown, both directly through the Department of Defense, but also with their partner investigators at a lot of the universities, is that anything above 30% really doesn't give you any longer effect or actually repel the mosquitoes more. So target at 30%, but again, if you're worried about that large of a percentage, there are a lot of products out there that are less, 20%, 18%. I've even seen them down to 5%. Just understand that the less amount that you have below 30%, the lower amount of time that it will actually give you a repellency effect.
Thank you, Ken.
We have a question that says, what is the best location to set a B&G mosquito trap? I think I can answer part of that, and then maybe I'll shoot it over to Dr. Merchant. The first thing is that B&G mosquito trap is not really a trap that you would utilize in a home environment for mitigating the mosquitoes. It's more of a surveillance device that would be utilized by your mosquito control district or local health department. So if you're thinking about purchasing one of these and utilizing it at your home, it's really not the best product for you to utilize for mitigating mosquitoes or controlling mosquitoes in a residential setting. So Dr. Merchant, do you have any other comments on that particular question?
B&G traps are designed to be able to place on the ground, and you want them to be fairly clear of vegetation, but you don't want them in direct sunlight. So a shady area that's not completely obscured by vegetation will get greater numbers of mosquitoes coming into these traps. And like Ken said, they're really more of a monitoring tool than they are a control tool in the backyard.
This concludes our webinar. I'd like to thank you all for joining the EPA Center for IPM. Bye and have a great day.